BTWRLM213. You crickets just won't give up, will you? You just don't. It's blustery as heck, making all kinds of noise in the forest, and you just squeaking your little legs together like nothing else to do. Okay, silence again. I don't know what to say. I just open up. I have all this stuff to say, and then I say that, and I say, we really are not doing it. And there's so many people making so many excuses about how they're not going to take any responsibility for the condition that we're living in. It's really amazing, and it's not that hard to figure out. And it's not that hard to defeat those that are doing this to us. And there's been a whole other element coming on. I've told you about silent weapons for quiet wars. I've explained to us, all of you, all that would listen. And then maybe to the point of the broken record. He keeps talking about this stuff. Let's get on to some more interesting things, you say. About the place that they give you. Just plug yourself in. This digital technocracy they have waiting for us. All set up, ready to go. Planned so many decades ago. And we did. We're plugging ourselves in, and we're finding out our vulnerabilities about that. And they're trying to get us into this, the switch cashless society condition. Now, I don't know if people are appreciating this, but I'm noticing people are actually engaging with fiat currency. They're actually embracing that stuff to show you how fast it moves. You get past the principles. Oh, better to have that than to have the crypto coins because, we see now the switch is there. And now they got you embracing the fact of the fiat. The fraud of the fiat, I guess I should say. And in a way, not so bad if you think about it. But what they also did, I've explained it to you, and in my naive little view of this, is that they just didn't give anybody the carrot. Yeah, they gave us the carrot. We're all going after it. A little stick on our head. They didn't give us the credit for ourselves that they stole from us for these exactions of every kind. Nobody looks to see what I keep telling you. For those that I haven't said it for a long time, those who go look. It's right in the code, what you're going to be up to for all you think you have civil rights. And that honorable Martin Luther King, whatever he was up to, you want your civil rights. You want your content of your character. You didn't even know what the words meant. Title 42. Section 1981. Is that it? I don't even know anymore. I don't even think about it. Is that right? Long-time listeners? Civil rights is the exaction is the privilege to pay exactions of every kind and no other. That's your civil rights. Go look at it. Go read it. And everyone's content in that. I've pretty much predicted how this would turn out that way, just using that from a long time ago, seeing, that's really that's the beginning and the end of how this all turns down. And nobody really wants to look at that and take that bull by the horns and maybe that's not the bull will kill you, but at any rate, guide the bull into a pen and keep it there. No, I have a bunch of people coming up and saying, government's no good, and society's no good, and we have to be anarchists and nothing we understand, and then we give, what was I just hearing, the stateless society? How inane are we going to get before we start looking at the right thing to do? Isn't that stateless society an oxymoron? Anyway, get on to the point of our vulnerabilities. Wanted to make some comments here going into the digital side of this. Some of you aren't interested, some of you are. I think it's important that we know this is the intelligence gathering part against us. Those of you that are going to step up and do something, it is part of the equation that you have to figure out. That they were telling, or like I was telling you before, and why my question about Snowden and all Snowjob and all these other people that were, especially because of the people before were ignored, and then all of a sudden Snowjob shows up. They were telling you about all these vulnerabilities so that you'd go to sleep, and you did. And we've already got the studies on that. They're already looking to see if it worked, and it worked. That you would go back to sleep on all this. Notwithstanding your knowledge, you would go back to sleep on it. And this is our problem generally on most everything. And probably why I start sounding like the broken record, because there's really not much more to talk about, but defeating this in us so we can go after the stuff that they're using against us, take that club away from them, and we don't need to go vicious on anything. I don't think I've ever advocated any kind of any violence, if I can put it that simple term. Everyone should recognize that word and the distinction. Force is required, but violence not necessarily at all. And so we can do it that way. As I've said, I've advocated actually against the Second Amendment in a way, because it seems to me we're a bunch of drunk kids, and we're being handed with a Second Amendment to go use is not a good scenario. And I've kind of looked into the future, my little crystal ball, and said that's probably not the best way for us to go. Not that it's not a way, it's there. I've told you it's there, but not a good way. Not if we're walking around in our blissful ignorance. So here we go on this. Get back onto these tabs so I get through them. I leave so much on the board every week. I never get to the point. Last week I realized I didn't even get to one of the points. Or the weeks before. I don't even remember now what's going on. The point about the mental health in the UN. I don't know if you paid attention, and I mentioned it, but I didn't make a point to connect this. And I wanted you to know, because this is happening. It's now on Twitter. It became a thing. The mental health movement is now a thing on Twitter. Mental health matters. If you didn't think all this was planned, and I told you that was coming, well, it already hit the Twitter. And that was started by a little video that I talked to you a couple weeks ago, where, Prince William is talking to Lady Gaga, of all people, about how Prince William's brother, Harry, has a mental health problem or trouble, and it's just dealing with the death of his mom, and that can, be pretty bad. I'm certainly not going to judge or interfere in any way that there's a real problem in that. But he comes up now today after all these years, and Lady Gaga didn't know she was a mental case. If you didn't know for what some of the stuff she pulls off. But at any rate, now they're teamed up to tell you that mental health matters. And right in line with how this UN mental health is now making the push to its finish line that I talked to you about in their document last week. That I will again tell you that I think it was Ron Steffen who dropped the link in UCY chat, or his broadcast, and was talking about it as well. All that's coming together. That you have to understand this is a movement coming through. It's not that mental health doesn't need to be a priority at some point, and we care for those people that have trouble. It's that this is coming through a movement on a global scale. This is the part of the globalism, and it's going to be a tool they use against you. And so this is the things that we have to be aware of. And these tools that they use against us is like the silent weapons for quiet wars, where you plug yourself into the technocratic future. It's all been planned. It's all why it kind of goes there. And you wonder why it doesn't have a link, how you don't see it going on. It's the incrementalism that goes on. And I'll continue my thought. I just looked down and saw something in the chat. But anyway, I'll just stay focused on what I'm talking about here. This is one of the problems with the chat. We could talk all day, I guess. The UK secret blueprint with telcos for mass spying on internet phones and backdoors. Again, I'll just read the title. That tells us all we need to know. But it's not just that you know that. It's that this is a plan. This is those that are running the show. Part of the joke about voting harder. Those that run this show have it all worked out, and they'll do everything to get you to buy in. You pay for it, to buy into their place that you plug in so they can monitor you. They need this information. And now we get it seen that the UK government and going through UK organizations are collecting up data, and it's all big time. And the question about your encryption being protection is kind of blown out of the water as well. And so this, again, I don't even want to, I think that should be enough. Governments are going against their people. That's not their government then. That's always been a foe. In the United States, as I relate it to mining districts, the government, the society, I'll put it this way and kind of relate to it. I didn't think about it this way, but the society of miners, as they get together and they find they need protection, created mining districts as their government. They became one and the same. It's a state. In fact, again, I'll just refer to all this stuff is right there. If anybody want to go look, I'm interested. I'm intrigued somehow. People that I know listen, they're listening to what I'm saying. It's like nothing I've said actually settles. Not everybody, but some. Things I talk about are 6 months down the road are being talked about like they're brand new, and I'm thinking, well, I just said that. We talked about that. We should be moving on. But the lawsuit that we filed, the Jefferson Mining District filed in 2013, the district was a foreign state, or it is a foreign state. Not the was, it is. And so there's not much different between the societies and the state when you come up together. The word state is an interesting term. And so getting over to this is the government, so-called UK government. I don't think it's anything such. They just call it, this is the fake news within the news, the lying within the lying. You just got to kind of pull this out. But here, the encrypted content that you thought you were sending has been, for a long time in the UK, been not a factor for the government. UK cops may soon be able to remotely disable phones, even if no crime has been committed. Think about this switch that they have. Your communication, your right to associate in America, you're not right to, I want you to follow this because you need to kind of pull this together. As I move through this, I realized something else developed in these tabs. They started out as warnings of your digital vulnerability, and then they turned into a whole other thing because of one court case that came forward here this last week. That we have glimpses that the Constitution isn't quite buried yet. And I'm here to tell you that if you don't understand how this works and you don't bring those words in your mouth whenever you can in the right ways where you can, that gets diminished in everybody. So this won't necessarily apply anymore, but I want you to listen for that. The UK cops may soon be able to remotely disable phones even if no crime has been committed. This agrees with what I've been telling you about the world. The globe is in a world war, and you are the enemy against the government. These people that have come under cover of government. They're not really the government. The cops can turn off phones even when crime has not been held. What else do they do in the United States and just about everywhere that has it in what we call civil forfeiture, but do the same thing? They take your rights and your property before there's been any conviction. I want you to remember that as we go through this, because we're going to talk about that. Hopefully I'll get to it. But here's this switch. You get in your phone. Remember, the United States government is their agency now, not even the courts, as I can see them yet, until they told me different. Their Supreme Court says that your phone is an interesting problem for the government in that it's just not any other device that they can jump into. And so some recent decisions are showing you there is breath yet, maybe the last ones, in a constitution that limits the extent of the powers of government to do things. Notwithstanding all you see that's wrong and been gone, and the license it gives itself. I've told you got to challenge it every turn as best as you can, and I attempt to try and give you those concepts on what you put your mind on to go do behind the woodshed all the time. I'm trying to do that for you. You don't get lost in your feelings. You don't get lost over there in what you thought it was supposed to be and what you've been told it's supposed to be. You go down and you do the hard work to do what they call due diligence in the liability side, in the contract side, in the market side. They always put it in the market commerce, but at any rate, we go that way. Contract not necessarily settled in commerce, but nonetheless, that's how your whole world has been adjusted right in front of your eyes. All you folks have been watching. But that's not the limit of it. And you put your mind on your due diligence that you have to do, because we can regard ourselves into property law here by due diligence. And you understand the subject matter you need to discuss as completely as you can find it. Not from secondary, tertiary, or sources or opinions, but from the people that you're having to deal with. Why? Because they've taken over your land. That's why. It has nothing to do with learning legalese. It has to do with learning that there's someone that took over your way of life and you didn't understand it, and the imposition under natural law is that you had to stop it. There's no excuse for that. So here they got it set up in the UK. They're telling you folks, I told you this before, it comes out of the UK for everybody. You got to kind of look at the depth of that. Why? UK cops may soon be able to remotely disable the phones, even if you're not haven't committed a crime. And this is how this has been going. So a little discussion has been had, and I'm going to just go through some tabs and read some source material coming from these things to give us an idea of the flavor of what's going on. Amendments to the law grant some pretty scary new powers to UK law enforcement, allowing them to kill citizens' means of communication. Quoting, I think, from the code here, law enforcement agencies can remotely disable or restrict a mobile home if it is suspected of being used for drug dealing or related to it, and in some cases, regardless of whether a crime has actually been committed. According to legal commentators analyzing this law, the law enforcement isn't being given a kill switch absolutely, but it's being given the next best thing, the court order. Police can approach service providers, and with a court order, the police can approach service providers and have them restrict or cut off service. But we know, and we know this by, if we didn't, more than opinion, we know this for fact, that the Bar Association and those judges is looking to impose a global order. It says it in their document, so this is not even my opinion. I'm not going to waste more time talking about that. I talk about that pretty extensively. Again, not my opinion. We're beyond an opinion here. We're beyond media. I'm reading this stuff as notice to us. And I think you need to all know to see this is going down. Why? Because these things build the foundation for your understanding from which you will respond in any time in the future. Right now, there may be no threat. But in the future, should there be one, you really are going to have to respond a whole lot better than sticking your head in the proverbial sand. It was the sand in Proverbs? Anyway, orders can apply if the user is, quote, facilitating the commission by the user or another person of a drug dealing offense, or, quote, conduct of the user that is likely to facilitate the commission by the user or another person of a drug dealing offense, whether or not an offense is committed. Does this sound much like the highways down in the southern south of the United States of America? See, this is all right there in the same type of venue. But here, okay, so there's a bunch of legalese that you need to understand how they're getting at you in the UK. I don't see it any different than already being implemented in the United States. But here it's being now seen that the government thinks it has the powers to do this. And what do? They tie it onto something we know there's a global war on. Well, they make these global wars to give you vulnerabilities, and no one says anything about it. So I say it's more. I don't think if anybody's appreciated, the 420 crowd is appreciated. When I keep telling you need to go into the DA with your letters, you're not talking to the DA and trying to stop that. You're starting to put pressure on the totality of that war, that drug war, which is being used against you and everybody else. And so this is when I look at something and I tell you that you got to look and do these things, my view is a lot deeper, and I kind of see the future of that pressure, where the mass of the people start to move and press on a very small spot, and you eventually will push down what is oppressing us, the wall. You push down the wall that's already there, that's been built up around us that we didn't understand. Anyway, I want to keep going on here. The UK now, it's found out they can look at all kinds of stuff. I don't know the technology behind it all. I've been telling you we got vulnerabilities. I've been telling you about these things even in my naivete, just my old experience in tech R&D. See, it's so far from my mind I don't even know what that stands for anymore. R&D. Amazing. Getting into designing and brand new technology. The writing was on the wall in there. You do this research and development on things that are coming into the world that aren't there, where you're watching material science come in. It's going to advance that technology. We could see the writing on the wall decades ago. Then I noticed the laws were actually building in. It's why it was starting to move in that direction. This has all been set before you. You can buy into it. You buy your phone. You buy this. You buy into all this connection, and that's part of all vulnerability. It's not just in us talking to each other. It's how you're going to exist in the world. And we can continue to ignore this. We can continue to buy into the blockchain. We can continue to move into the technocratic world, or we can stop walking with the ring in our nose, stop walking at all with this unprincipled future, and bring a principle to it. Why I ask you to come behind the woodshed. And for as much as I appreciate the comments about telling people about the broadcast. I'm not trying to whip your ass. I'm attempting to get you prepared to go do that to the people that are coming against you. If you listen very carefully to the end of the broadcast on the file broadcast, when I put the close on the broadcast, which I don't do anymore for this broadcast live, you'll hear me say that you're going to put your weapons on those that misbehave. I'm not here to put weapons on you. Now, it may feel like it because I'm talking to you. I'm wanting you. Hope beyond hope. Everyone steps up and does all moves in any direction you want. It won't matter. We're just moving in the right ways. So I'm not wanting to whoop your ass. I'm wanting you to get able to take out those that are misbehaving. You have to do that. The whole concept of this broadcast has been that for the entire time. Now, how you go about that is another judgment. I kind of do the loss thing because I found out that's the objective basis. My experience has shown that there's no defeat for it when it's properly applied. Why? Because there can't be a better opinion than what that society has agreed would be the objective basis. So it's very important how you understand how this all works. But they're taking this legislation, these occupiers in the governments, these global psychopaths and sociopaths, are taking that law and changing it over time. And that just is that's simply the natural law definition of international law of a usurper, of an occupier. It's really not that complicated. And that rule requires a pretty simple steps. That rule requires when you sense or find or believe you have an occupier, you have to throw him out. It's that simple. There's no other decision about that. Now, are you an anarchist to the usurpation that comes on you? Well, no, because that's not actually your society. They're making it their society that you could be an anarchist to, but that was let's say in the United States of America, that was your government to keep. You lost it. Now you got to get it back. You're not an anarchy to that. That's not a legitimate government. They say it's de facto. Everyone uses these words, doesn't understand what they mean, or doesn't understand what that means to them as far as an obligation and duty. I'm just fascinated more than anything else, I think. I get disappointed a lot. But it's fascinating to watch people use words and terms. And as they use the terms, I'm just looking and say, well, you may not really know what you're talking about here. Sounds good. But there's not going to be any traction. So I try to bring the belt to the traction here, so that you understand and get the example of where it is you're going to be doing your own, such that you will, and we have to. It's not my choice. It's not my decision. It's not my rule. So the UK government's coming out, all this, everyone, this whole matrix I've been telling you about, the quiet weapons for quiet wars circuit that they get you to plug into. There's your voluntarism. Once you've done it, it's over. They get you to, it's controlled. It's been made up. This is all proving all that concept out. The hijacking flaw that lurked in Intel chips is worse than anyone thought. I wasn't going to talk about this when I noticed something. And I think there's a few people that listen to me, or even reallibertymedia.com network and chat, that do technology deeper than I would ever consider at this point in my life, but that are involved much deeper, that may need to understand this. There is apparently a very serious flaw. They're apparently making a patch, but you need to know if your system is in this. A remote hijacking flaw that lurked in Intel chips for 7 years was more severe than many imagined because it allowed hackers to remotely gain administrative control over huge fleets of computers without entering a password. Now, I'm just going to stop there. For all of you that don't know about it, doesn't matter. Those that you already may know about this. If you don't, I'm calling your attention. For all of you guys that have fleet, your fleet IT, if you know anybody, you might want to get in touch with them. Now, remember, there's also planned breaches inside the Intel chip now. And malware, Windows 10 malware, wants to be the only thing that runs on those brand new Intel chips. But notwithstanding all that obvious breach to you, this is another serious one that affects complete network. So I just wanted to pass that on. Those of you that are really slick, you'll be able to find this on Ars Technica. And if you can wait, then you'll see the link in the blogcaster when I put it together. Another thing to be careful of, and this is how you got to look out as you're working through in this digital world. Again, this is all made up. We're going to find out what this is. I find very interesting little inserts in these stories too. As I tell you, just one paragraph can kind of unravel the whole thing for you if you know kind of what you're looking at there. and at least in a quick way. Stop using unroll.me right now. It sold your data to Uber. Tucked away in a rollicking New York Times profile of amoral Uber CEO Travis Kalanick is a tidbit about unroll.me, a popular service that aims to rescue your email inbox from unwanted newsletter and promotional messages with an easy automated unsubscribe service. The problem is Uber's been selling you out to advertisers, and you should not be using it immediately. And I see Grimmer in the chat, in the Real Liberty chat. Yeah, this is not a flaw. None of these are flaws, actually. They just got caught. So I appreciate that, Grimmer. Yeah, I mean, I can't say all that's in my mind. I just say what's in my mind and move on. But there's so much to say on all this. It's to reinforce the fact that you've been had. This company's third party to this technology that's already hacked. I told you, big data. This is all big, all this digital thing, all the services you get through the computers. It's all going to be tied to big data. They get their money selling. It used to be a big deal. It probably still is. I've been so far away, I don't know. When you had to get mailing lists, when we used actual printed labels for envelopes, those were big money for companies that kept these lists. And you would make these lists by every registry they could find, because we weren't tied together on the internet at that time. Every list they could find, the companies would collect all these names and addresses together, and they would sell these names for your cold calling or selling and all that stuff. And it used to be pretty pricey. That's where it's kind of was, and now it's gone into digital. It's just so much quicker to do all this. That you get into these digital things, and this whole thing is set up to do the big data sale, data mining to sell, then data mining to interpret. And this is where we start getting, the government starts to do it when we get this pre-crime nonsense that they put their AI, these made-up math algorithms on to determine whether or not they can tell your mind and what you're going to do in the future by who you were just walking by and how you were communicating, or who you just communicated to, or about what. No analysis on whether that could be a joke. I don't know. Can a robot tell a joke? Can a robot laugh at one? Well, Barman does, so maybe I'm off my mark here. Go ahead, get in that RLM chat. And what do you put in there, Grimner? You make Barman laugh. I guess Barman has a sense of humor. Yeah, so you can do this really clever programming, but can they really tell a joke? Can they really take a joke? I don't know. And so how do these people gathering this data can really interpret some of the nuances that makes you who you are? Is amazing, but they're doing it. They're stealing your stuff without really telling you, and they hid it underneath. They hid it underneath your user agreements. When you click on, do you agree with all this? So anyway, just word to the wise. This is just one program. I'm sure there's just thousands and thousands and thousands. Just like you would find in all your phone apps that have all different types of capacities. They're using all these fantastic technological things to do amazing things, but it's all to big data you into submission, into control, into mind control, to setting up your future, the one they want. Beware phishing emails posing as Google Docs invites. Be careful of when you click on things, you really have to know where they're going, but these people are getting very good at hiding what they really are. Beware of phishing emails posing as Google Docs. Oh, that's right. Grimner is saying it's ROFL. If you get into the RLM chat, Barman will laugh with you if you put in ROFL. And it is a clever bot, Grimner. I think it's pretty funny. That you can have things, these computers do funny things and do things, and I found that out long time ago. You can get pretty clever, and you can make machines do things that people can't really conceive they can do. But beware of phishing emails, because as you know, they'll make a Google Doc now, and I'm really despising Google. I have for a long time, for as much as again, it's always the good with the bad. It really bothers me when people do this, but that's not. I just try to stay away as much as possible. those of you that are hooked in, be very careful. Wanted you to know, really just a PSA type thing as we go along. Now, let's go to this information, this big data, that it means commerce. And that means, and everything you do, I've told you this before in other areas, everything you do is reduced to a monetary value because this is a commerce world. And you think you get back over to what we call natural law? They got you on that. The natural law was a usurpation and occupation. They brought your natural law through there. And so this world that we live into, and it's why your internet's not really private, and nothing on it is private. It's really one big commerce usufruct. I didn't cuss. Usufruct. And that's how this thing goes through. And there was no way that we ever thought about before until this thing is what it is to make the distinction between the uses. What I find interesting is that your speech becomes a commerce. Remember, I told you this marketplace of ideas that the United States Supreme Court brought up told me that even your speech has become commercialized, even if it's not intended to. It's almost all what I say political speech. Politics is commerce. And remember, I keep all this stuff starts flashing through my head. When this nation, the United States, started after the Declaration of Independence, it was subject to the prior engagements, the prior commerce engagements that were made and linked up to reconnect the people who declared their independence with how the new structure would be built. And it's in a political jurisdiction. And that's it. There's I think I've told you, I've said this over and over. All this stuff is over and over. It really is like a broken record, but no one really seems to hear what I'm saying about that. This was only a singular in the conceptualization of sovereignty. The United States is but 1/5 to 1/7 a total sovereign, as it was created as a political organization. And so I'm suggesting that you understand these terms, not words, these terms, so that you understand what you're up against. Whether or not you have to respond now is really irrelevant, but to dismiss these terms and the reality of what they do, notwithstanding our indignance that they're being used against us, or we think we don't need to use them, they are being used against us. You, me, everyone. So all this all comes through a commerce attitude, and here's where we start to see about your speech. And it's brought up an interesting conversation in my mind, at least very quickly, about what they're doing in all this. That here's to show you about all this stuff I've been talking about, UK and all this stealing and all this wanting to get in and control you, and the government's angle on it, and the corporate angle on it, which may be not much different between government now and corporation. But I'm not all weirded out about the fact of a body politic is a corporation as well as a corporation. A legal entity can be a corporation. It's an aggregated interest with one purpose. And you should see the problem in that, because even in corporate structures, when you look very carefully about this aggregated interest, there is majority holders and minority holders, and there was a rule developed that said that minority holders aren't going to be prejudiced by the majority, even in a corporation. And you start breaking all this stuff out, you start saying, well, this is again, I call it the fractal, it's political fractal, the legal fractal, whatever you want, whatever jurisdiction word you want to use, it's this fractal of us. We keep denying it all, but it sits right there for us to see, and I think that when you keep denying it, you're just prolonging the pain and the misery. And you'll say different, but I mean, I hear it all the time, but it really is not solving anything, and it's not taking up the responsibility. It's clear that it needs to be done. So here, let me just get to the title here. You think Google search is free? Austria seeks to tax it anyway. And this was very interesting little look at how these governments who want to tax you conceive of these things. Social Democrats, I levy on ads, taxes on digital, quote, barter. They view your giving up your information as a value that is taken on by the government the internet providers as having a market value from which it's in trade, from which the providers derive a profit should interest you about your so-called free speech, your freedom of expression, at the point of a government looking at it. Austria is seeking ways to make digital services like Alphabet Incorporated corporations, Google, or Facebook Incorporated pay taxes for transactions with the nation's internet users, trying to plug gaps in the tax system still designed for brick-and-mortar business. Now, you got to understand this also about what taxes end up being and why they brought up brick-and-mortar businesses adverse to the internet. And when you start studying what taxes are, and really what they apply to, not what they're being applied to, or not what people voluntarily themselves into having it applied to, but what it's to apply to, you have to come away with the idea that maybe tax is not so much theft. The abuse of the liability is really what we're responding to, which is improper. But when you find out what a tax is for, and there's a reason for it, you hear a little bit right here, that this tax system is still designed for brick and mortar businesses, and they're trying to bring parity between the businesses by this. They're legal entities, okay? Let's get right to it. They're not men and women, and they're not men and women that are dumb enough to accept and voluntarily themselves to be legal entities. By the very deceptive scheme of using characters that look like your name or the one you thought was yours, deceptively styled in order to make you believe it's you, and then deal with that. And this is not just a legalism or a trifleness. This is exactly how this works. And I don't get too much more involved. I don't get into all the names about it. I just know the function, and I know how I've told you how to defeat it. That you can't shows you have somebody in the offices of the decision of the government that are criminals. It's really quick to identify this. But here's a little glimpse. The tax system is still designed for brick and mortar businesses to bring parity on commerce. And they're saying that your communication, the information you give, has a value in commerce for these companies, which they deem you to be in a barter transaction with. Should be a little bit interesting to you, I would think. And if it's not, well, what am I supposed to say about your interest? But given the oppression we live under, I think you should be interested in it. And I think it should form a little bit of an interest. It's kind of an interesting idea. Get your mind having to work with how these magicians have done this stuff. Raising more taxes for digital businesses is part of a broader plan to amend the country's corporate tax code. Guess what? That's all there is. You've covered that over in the United States, but that's all there is. Remember, 1910 court case said that there was a certain the taxes were upon a certain class of legal entities. In 1913, a court case said, and the new tax law in 1913 didn't change that. People seem to miss that part. And when people tried to argue that they weren't this corporation, I started to look at how the government responded. I said, oh, that's not, you don't go that path. Go a different one. And so I developed for myself, and it's now been found out by a few more people, how to start to set that record. Well, I keep telling you about this record. It's so important. But we're seeing little secrets in this little article here. I thought it was amazing. You don't have a choice either that your expression is considered the marketplace of ideas. It's in commerce. You don't have free speech, actually. Yeah, I won't go more. There's so much in these articles, I don't even know where to start or begin at some level. I just got to let you know. You may be interested, and this is my problem. I'm sitting here behind the woodshed talking to you all. I want to give you the weapons that the belt that you're going to go take to the one that's misbehaving. It's easier for me to work on the one that's misbehaving and knowing who that is or what your problem is. So I got to talk. I'm speaking in the blind, if you will, from the blind, behind the woodshed, to the blind, and possibly the deaf, the crickets. It makes it a little difficult for me to organize things up when I discuss this. Now, again, I just take these notices and just tell you here's important knowledge. Written in even this news, this fake news, the good news with the bad, all this is right here. Learn to discern. To me, it's really fascinating how this construct has been put up against it. I don't like it. I don't like having to come to terms with having to go deal with it or learn about that thing to go deal with it and then find out the deciders in there are criminals. I don't like any of that. But it is a reality. And it's a real reality for those that take on the responsibility to confront it. And more conversations I've had this week have certainly been wrapped right around the fact that there's just not enough of us. It's easy to defeat. There's just not enough of us, and persistently so. Everybody seems to make excuses. I even talk with people good-hearted. Every other opportunity of response, if not every opportunity to respond, is a negative, fear-based response. And then which is okay, I get to talk about that. I get to explain how that's misperceived and how the question trying to be an answer is still a question, creating the end result. You create the outcome in your perception of the question you ask about how things are going to proceed. And when I hear that, I can hear you're already defeating yourself. I can then explain how you reframe what you're looking at. And a lot of that reframing comes from an ignorance to not know you could reframe or what to reframe your situation to. As I help people and I ask simple questions, and the work that comes back based on simple questions evolves and it develops fascinating proofs, confirmations, and directions, more importantly, for people to resolve their problem. It now becomes a no fear whatsoever, an absolute action, on point, on focus, with the black and white, all objective basis that absolutely no one can argue against. And when they do, you know they're a criminal. It's pretty simple and fast. But I hear people respond in a question and in a negative and from fear. And that I'm noticing is from a lack of knowledge of the tools, I would say, maybe to keep it simple here, the tools available. And if you're proceeding in a if something, then you're not proceeding in a knowledge. It's the starting of a question, and you haven't resolved the question. So continuing here, keep moving back and forth from how important this is. This is getting back to this taxing, very, very interesting disclosures here, I would have to say, about Austria. Well, how it characterizes something to give it authority, these people thinking that they're government, to bring this taxing power. But within that, how I can show you, as I just did, that means that your so-called speech is actually a market value. It's not free. It's been monetized. And it's been monetized by those that take license because you didn't say, wait a minute, that's not what I did there. And or you continue to do it in knowledge of that. And so they take your voluntary use of that, your plugging in, your buy-in and plug-in, as your consent. And it's why, I mean, when I say it that way, I just, all arguments about voluntarism goes out the window, and how people don't think it is it just goes right out the window. Because I can see very clearly how this all works from that point. Not that I see all, I just see these things. You don't allow these things on you, and when you do, by your silence, or by your use, or by your commitment, or by your incorrect response, they take great license. And this is I don't like it. This is not my rule. But this is what we're up against. And to disregard it, I'm feeling, because we address it, when we address it, it stops. So therefore, it sets my opinion, if it's an opinion I have. It's really just conversing with you, the experience that when you do take the responsibility on subject matter and you apply that and you don't let these people get away with their deception, it starts to end. And I say starts because it's a little bit of work continuing as you start to shut down that machine that started up. 234 Android applications, exacting. 234 Android applications are currently using ultrasonic beacons to track users. So all this fascinating technology The companies, these big data gatherers, are actually calling out, having your devices that you agree by taking up certain applications to be tracked by. So everyone wants to talk about Big Brother or what all, that big monster, and they want to show, Apple Computer will show you, oh, this is the dystopian government talking head on the black and white screen. They've kind of got you to thinking it's them, those things on the black and white screen, and they didn't. You never looked around and said, but it was you that started that. A team of researchers from Brunswick Technical University in Germany has discovered an alarming number of Android applications that employ ultrasonic tracking beacons to track users and their nearby environment. Wired for sound, folks. This is better than RFID. I told you these little phones are concentrated eval. They get you somehow. We should have guessed it when they could program phones, program computers that are not wired to the internet by sound or laser, and any number of different methods to hack the systems using just physics and vulnerabilities, things that are typically completely out of our brain, and that's where they work. Their research paper focused on technology of ultrasound cross-device tracking that they even have a mnemonic UXDT that became very popular in the last 3 years. UXDT is the practice of advertisers hiding ultrasounds in their ads. When the ad plays on a TV or radio, or some ad code runs on a mobile or computer, it emits ultrasonic sounds that are picked up by the microphone of a nearby laptops, desktop, tablets, and smartphones. The Internet of Things, folks. Alexa, your thermostat on your wall. SDKs embedded in the apps installed on those devices relay the beacon back to the online advertiser, who then knows that the user of the TV X is also the owner of smartphone Y, and links their two previous advertising profiles together, creating a broader picture of the user's interests, device profile, home, and even family members. They go on to talk about all this stuff. If you're outside going down to a business and they've got computers listening and the ad is playing, or you're listening on your phone, or some of these beacon advertisements come out of your email, whatever, they can track you that way, and they give you, this is like why they would maybe show you a screen that has you and what you were interested in just a few weeks ago, a few steps down, you lollied in front of the sports shop and looked at a particular rod and reel, or you're in front of the shoe store, and next thing you know, 3 stores down, you're looking at those shoes. Buy this. The beacons communicate amongst each other in the Internet of Things. In ultrasonic, as you most likely can't hear it. Now, certain ultrasounds I used to be able to hear. I haven't been around to test it, but they were irritating to me. Maybe that's why some of these TVs are irritating to people. They irritate me to no end sometimes. And so this is a sound that's going on you can't hear. It's just frequencies that are coming out. But so anyway, these beacons are in these apps. You go ahead, buy in and plug in, folks. There it is. It's tracking you around, building up the big data to follow you and follow your friends and make your associations for you. Now, let's not get too far from what the problem with also is. The cops and the government are doing the same thing. And that, I told you a long time ago, then you get some cop that don't like you or decides to he wants brownie points and merit points because he wants to be on the plunder of the month poster for that month. He wants to make you his object. He starts to take all this information and he makes up a story about you. The evidence of all this placing you at the scene of the crime, or the fabrication of a scene of a crime and putting you there, I've been telling you for years. It's just being confirmed here and there. This is how they're going to put you someplace. Tasers will use police body camera videos to anticipate criminal activity. There's a whole lot in just that title, folks. This should scare you to death. What did I just say? The government's using this information. You can't talk to a cop now. They're probably going to be wearing one of these cameras, the Taser company. What do they want to do? They want to monopolize video information, facial recognition, profiles, all this thing to the police and sell it. Big data. And you don't have a say. Apparently, you're talking with the cops now becomes a commercial transaction, and you trade that information to the cops so that this third party can make money against you and help to potentially advocate some more harm against you by the government. When civil liberties advocates discuss the dangers of new policing technologies, they often point to sci-fi films like RoboCop and Minority Report as cautionary tales. Those were the plan, folks. In RoboCop, a massive corporation purchases Detroit's entire police department. Does this sound, how about Flint, folks, about the water? Boy, this is the way this works. After one of its officers gets fatally shot on duty, the company sees an opportunity to save on labor costs by reanimating the officer's body with sleek weapons, predictive analytics, facial recognition, and the ability to record and transmit live video. Although intended as a grim allegory in the pitfalls of relying on untested proprietary algorithms to make lethal force decisions, RoboCop has long been taken by corporations as a roadmap. And no company has been better poised than Taser International, the world's largest body camera vendor, to turn the firm's ironic vision into earnest reality. So they go through and they tell you about all this stuff they're going to collect from the cops. They're actually giving the cameras. Remember, nothing's free. The cops get free. They get to now get access to all this video. They do terabytes of video compiling at their servers. Third party. You don't even have a chance to say no. This is how deleterious this becomes to all of us, especially with that guy sitting behind the scene wants to make a buck. Remember, when they went to Best Buy, the FBI was paying the techs in there to look for porn, and then we found out they were actually starting to plant it. Such as greed in people's mind. How easy you see principles fall. And more. So, again, I guess I can stop reading. The cops will take your data, and you've made a barter with them over that. Well, they come to beat you down. And if they didn't get to beat you down, well, they got you on some file in a third party that will take this and sell it to other people, other governments, other places. We'll use it for advertising. We'll use all kinds of things, and understand that this data is now by that view of the Australia discussion. Why that discussion is so important. You are in a commerce world. No matter they need to do this for some reason. I haven't figured out the actual right they have, but they do it anyway, and they're confining everything into this commerce connection. Now you don't have a freedom of association either. Then, and I'm saying this because under the Constitution of the United States, whether it's anywhere else, there is supposed to be a freedom from association. It's always the corollary to the affirmative. The corollary of the freedom to associate has a right of freedom from association. Now, it seems to be that's completely destroyed at this level. But, keep moving. Remember what I said earlier. The tattered Constitution still has a place yet, despite all we've heard about how battered it really is. The nail is in that last coffin, folks. I mean, it's just right there. So while they're also looking at your getting this information everywhere they can, and these private corporations are just running roughshod. Again, I don't know if your mind ties all this together as I'm not even talking about it or not. Remember, this goes to the so-called robots. All this becomes a robot someday as well. That's supposedly making decisions. So I mean, it's kind of wild. My mind starts to shut down a bit. First of all, I don't want to think that far. I got to spend time dealing with the problem today. And if I'm successful, then maybe all that doesn't come to the fruition of the plan. Maybe we subvert the plan. So I tend to look a little bit to see where they're still going, how they're going, how fast they're going, and then start to make decisions whether or not I can move in the direction or incorporate certain aspects which slowly move into the direction as we move along. This is what I did in our lawsuit in 2013. It's amazing how much you can bring in depending on how you frame the oppression, how you explain the act which is a violation to those similarly situated. And I say that because that's one of the elements of an extraordinary remedy. You have to identify that those that are those that are similarly situated in the problem. And so it takes a little bit of thought here to work this out. And you can't do it on just an absent belief on what you think the world is like. You have to deal with what the reality is, whether you like that or not. It's what's in your face. Now, if you've been able to cloister yourself away and you need to lick your wounds for a while because life beats you up, that's fine. But at some point, every day that's going on, and you're licking your wounds, you're not really helping, and there may be something new coming along that you're not preparing for. At least getting your mind available into how to deflect it and give yourself more time in this scenario where we are being attacked, no matter how we do it, and we are being confronted by all this theft. It's right in our face under the color of authority. And so they're giving you another connection. So this association, these associations have been monetized to say that when you give it up, you have created a barter which is taxable, which is usable by the government. That totally took away now your ability to have the right, not cost of it, but the right to associate or to not associate. And so this is I want to point out is when someone comes to you, and let's just focus on the cops, and they don't really have a probable cause. They've been given license to do what they've done. They talk about community care. But when they walk away and they've gotten all this data now, and they didn't have an actual cause, they've just stolen a whole lot of stuff from you. Now, I'm going to hear a lot of crickets on that one, but that's in fact what they're doing. When they approach you, and they don't have actual probable cause, and then they do something that takes this value from you. See, I've told you, you have to reduce your whole life down to a value. If you go do damages, you're going to have to reduce your harm to a dollar value. It doesn't matter. Your feelings of your harm is not valuable. Not on your say, at least, for certain, and then only in the strictest of circumstances can someone else interpret that potential harm for you. And that's all reduced to actions and incapacities that are reduced to a monetary value. So you start thinking your mind, you put your mind in this commercial connection to the world, and it's hooking into you. The Matrix is not a movie. And you get to see better how this thing works, and you get to see how we've been violated and how often and where. And then and I look at it as all opportunities now to take these very things that they've constructed and say, but that was a violation under the objective basis. And you say, which objective basis? Well, that's here coming as I get to it. I might actually get to it. A couple more tabs away. But right now, so what do we do in part of this thing? We see we're infiltrated and surrounded, as I've been telling. We're digitally hacked completely, fabricating realities at every point to get us to buy into it. And that we either plug in or they plug us in. And we don't speak up in the first moment to say, hold it now, you couldn't go there, and then be persistent enough to stop it. Let's say, and I'm not saying that I would do this because there's other bigger issues that we could do, but it's as important to talk about. A cop stops you, gives you harassment, you realize they have one of those cameras, you go down and get a FOIA if it's federal, or a records request, a writings request from the state through those laws, those statutes, and you find out their record, you get their record, you force them to give you those records. You find out in the record that they give you that they have no probable cause. You monetize that value of that interaction, and you monetize what the value of the information they have, and then you monetize the harm for them gathering information and violating your right to be free from that and their contracts as unconscionable against you and their interpretation of your presence there as a value without your consent. Push that. See where that goes. It may not go far. It may go all the way. And that'll really depend on how you understand that system and how you attack it and how you get it out in front of the public. Why it's really important to get lots of people. So it's an option. I don't know that I would choose that right now. But we're giving the tools here. We're given the evidence. It's going on in front of us, and we're given the evidence on how it is being constructed against us. That when you apply even the things that don't look like they're working, we'll say constitutional limitations. Here we go, coming in a little bit here. You're going to see that there's still vestiges of the response in the Constitution alive and well. How do we hide some of this information on the internet from these people? Well, I know there's going to be It's all digital, ones and zeros. There's going to be a hack for everything. But you can still throw blocks in. You can still do certain types of things. There's pretty smart people out doing some of this, and for the meantime, we still have tricks up our sleeve. And here's another one. A trick that hides censored websites inside cat videos. And I just want you to know about this. It's kind of interesting. It seems to me it's acting like tunneling, if you will. A pair of researchers behind a system for avoiding internet censorship wants to deliver banned website inside a cat videos. Their system uses media from popular innocuous websites the way a high schooler might use the dust jacket on a textbook to hide the fact that he's reading a comic book in class. Please do not approach this like a high school student. However, to the overseeing authority in the classroom, the teacher, on the internet, a government censor, the content being consumed appears acceptable, even when it's illicit. So, in trying to find ways to get information out or in or by censorship, someone's come up with a thing called slit theme. The researchers who work at the University of Waterloo's cryptography lab, I'll get it right, multisyllabic, the University of Waterloo's cryptography lab, named Slitheen after a race of aliens from Doctor Who wear the skins of their humans victims to blend in. The system uses a technique called decoy routing, which allows users to view blocked sites, like a social networking site or a news site, while generating a browser trail that looks exactly as if they were just browsing for shoes and watching silly videos on YouTube. So there's a super technology. They've looked like they've looked at a lot of this, how a prior attempt to do this failed. They've seemingly fixed those. It still requires that you still have to go through some servers. It still requires that it's like the Tor network. So you have that. But they've looked at a lot of this. And again, I'm just talking to you about what you might need to put, how you may still be able to cover yourself a bit here in the future, and how you may want to, and how maybe there's programs that make it really easy. Right now it's a little cumbersome. Now, I won't address the beacons, but it certainly would address you getting, if you need to get out some information or get in some information that you can't otherwise do when the government has the ability to lock you out. That becomes really apparent, really needful for you. See, most of us are lapping in the luxury of our internet connection. Most of us won't understand about being cut off. Well, you understood it last week when I lost the router. That was it. They cut that switch. Well, it was a local power problem, but that's the point. All of a sudden, you're not listening to me. Those that still listen. Those that still want to try and figure something out. Hopefully do something with it. There's people working on how to go about keeping yourself somewhat protected, and how to overcome the things that are the telltale markers of somebody attempting to get information that's censored. And this works a little bit like the Tor. We've got Unix on the Linux distributions. Unix uses Unix gateways with Tor, double tunneling, utilizing the Tor network. This works through a browser in the same way, and so it would need help that you would become a. If this ever, I don't know what the popularity would be. I don't know the actual security of it. Those that could look into it may want to help to be a relay station. I don't know. I'm just saying that there's people out here. There's a lot of us that could be doing what we need to do in order to help each other do what we need to do. And that's not a question. It's already happening. It's just that we're not, overall, we're not enough of us embracing a lot of these things to bring it along and continue up on it. So, so this is a trick to keep us transparent. The Tor browser system works very similarly. It makes you look like any other browser except for your connection through the Tor network. In other words, they're called fingerprinting. They don't allow you to, in fact, they tell you don't touch a lot if you don't understand. Leave the settings the way they are. Even though I don't like Google, when I block Google, that's a fingerprint mark that someone else doesn't do, and that starts to build the fingerprint that I'm in there because of what I've blocked. And so you want to look like that herd they keep treating you, they say is out there. You want to look like the herd. You don't want to do a lot of things to make you look different. Is how the Slytherin works. Did I say that right? Is that the right name? Doesn't matter. You'll find it. There's a link in the broadcaster. The anonymity is in that you look the same as everybody else, and the odds of finding you out are very much more difficult. So, looking transparent, being able to get something past is very a critical tool. And then this came up, which I found just in a way just interesting beyond. These people, these are brilliant, and they don't ever stop inventing things. Is the way I looked at this one. It just didn't. It was almost like I was looking. This is a April 30th story. I thought, are you sure this is not from the April 1st? Not because they're not going to do this, but because I'm not so sure we don't see the telltale signs of a fraud in this, but that they can take this provision, as I say, they can create an environment that puts you anywhere, is now handed to us to say they can find DNA in dirt now. And here's the kicker. No bones needed. And that kicker is what caught me to say, wait a minute. With all the deceptiveness that's going on, here's just another thing going on. They have no actual basis. They create an underlying non-basis in order to validate a assumption that everyone buys into again, and they plug into the assumption and condemn whomever they're targeting. This looks like a setup to the future tool for a number of things, whether you want to find yourself, fabricate yourself in a place because you need to find a blood lineage to the soil, or the government just wants to find you in the place that they've said that the Israelis can reproduce your DNA anywhere. DNA can now be extracted from dirt. New tech may solve many mysteries of human origins. No bones needed. That is a problem. With no evidence of bones, what do you think you're measuring? It was the first question that came to my mind. That very point, if I don't need bones, means I can make it up anything I want to do. I don't need to say that anything was there. An amazing technology involving technology innovation in the study of DNA has been called a game changer in the research into ancient humans and hominids. It may solve many of the mysteries that exist in relation to origins of humans and could completely rewrite our family tree, is what they're after. No bones needed. We're just going to make up this DNA. A new study published in the Journal of Science has revealed a technique that can extract human and hominid DNA from dirt. No bones needed. This means that by simply taking a half a teaspoon of soil from a cave and running it through the new analysis, scientists will know if species of ancient hominids lived in the cave and who and what they were. Remember, I've told you, look very carefully at game-changing technology. Not because it's not game-changing, but because they can hide a whole lot of devilish conditions in there. This is a pretty damn incredible, said Rob Scott, an evolutionary anthropologist at Rutgers. I'll say it again, what the motive is. Evolutionary anthropologist at Rutgers. Tom Hingham, an Oxford professor who specializes in dating bones, called the discovery a, quote, new era in Paleolithic archaeology. Scientists have known for over a decade that DNA, which may have come from urine, feces, sweat, blood, semen, and or decomposed body, can survive in ancient sediments, even for hundreds of thousands of years. But they had no way to analyze it. Just a teaspoon of dirt can contain trillions of fragments of DNA from dozens of different species. Hybrid what? Gene splicing who? That would be a what, wouldn't it? I mean, we're talking about a chimera, right? I mean, we're going to measure all this DNA. However, research from Max Planck Institute in the evolutionary anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, discovered that they could cut through the clutter with a molecular hook made from the mitochondria DNA of modern humans. This means that essentially they were able to pull out fragments of DNA that specifically belong to a human or hominid species. Can I stop now? This is a setup. I told you they can unzip your DNA to make new DNA. These people say they're using a hook. Isn't also a hook the thing they use to pull you off the stage, or to bring you into a joke, or to hook you into a bad deal? Something smells worse than fish here. No bones needed caught my mind. I hope it caught your mind. They're making this stuff up. We don't necessarily, I don't think we have enough knowledge to understand what is going on there, being the DNA that I understand they're talking about that might be in soil is so small a piece it can be assembled in any way and fashion. That's just on the surface of this. But enough said, I think. This is pretty terrifying that they can just tell you by so-called technology that they can find whatever they want. It was developed by an evolutionarily minded group of people. And yes, I'm speaking that negates the ability for creation to exist. They need to make a connection that they cannot make in the evidences that are out there between a human and a man. The ape, primate, and a man. That's not my imposition. That's just a failure of all this time. I've seen, in what was called my attention to scientific fraud, I've told you this a little bit before, I won't go too deep, making a report on Piltdown Man, and no evidence while I was making that report when I was a little one, moving into being one of those, being a scientist, where you had to draw what you saw, you had to report on what your data said, make those book reports, bleeding, arduous book reports. Found out after all my study that I was studying a fraud. Why? Because someone wanted to make the name for themselves, and they wanted to make these connections through life on Earth, so-called. That this reeks of a problem. DNA can now be extracted from dirt without bones. Does not bode well for the honesty of things when you look at what conservation sciences are, what agenda sciences are based, that they, whether you look at people wanting to prove their point, what they'll do, and the humanist condition is right here on its surface, or people like in the Palestine trying to prove they have blood proof to their existence in a place, is a really astonishing magic trick that people, I'm concerned that people are going to buy into that and plug in, and then where do we go from there? But we're totally on the left foot, right foot, whatever, the wrong foot. And someone gets hurt by the deception. So now they can find whatever they tended to want to find. And I will not be surprised at all if they all of a sudden starting to find everywhere the connections that have been evading proof. Why do they even need the dirt? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if you don't need bones, you don't need the structure that maintained the organism. And you think you could get little bits and microscopic pieces, nano pieces of DNA, and you think that all those puzzle parts mean something. Boy, you are somebody. And that extraordinary leap, it tends to show me that there needs to be an extraordinary proof. And I think I'll just stop right there. There's something wrong here, and we'll watch this develop or not. But we'll watch it. I think we will watch it develop, and you're going to start maybe seeing some very interesting things and critters and all kinds of stuff develop just to prove certain agendas. So they make stuff up. They steal what they need to steal. They do it right in front of your face. We're so dumbed down, we don't even know what's up and what's down anymore. Those of us that try to make a principle are chastised or called names, which is fine. You can call me a name right off the bat. I know who you are. It's not a problem. But that also shows That also shows that we have a long way to go. If it's peace on earth, that ain't going to fly. Anyway, move on to evidence on property and how we know it's ours or not, and what people are doing to steal it, to get around certain things to profit. It's all, again, a commerce construct. You're the beast of burden. You're going to work and you're going to pay the exactions of every kind. And there hasn't been seemingly much constraint on that plunder, except to this last week. And my whole view on this has been, why is this even a question? And then it is, well, it has been. Isn't that so sad? And in fact, we needed to come till today to find out the fact of what was actually going on in the past is still relevant. When I tell you about relation back doctrine and things like that, this kind of rings in my mind a bit here. There's laws that are antecedent certain concurrent agendas that supersede those agendas and prevail against them. Prevail against the attorney's thoughts, the court's, the general court consensus of where things go. The ideas that some man in a black robe can actually determine things in law and is not persuaded by other things has really been an interesting view in my mind, that I don't see how people can even believe in it. But we do. We do generally. So here's a very interesting and powerful thing. Remember now, we talked about the UK getting into back doors of the ISPs and all the big corporate companies. We have now here the chips. Intel had a problem. This is a software problem, I think, inside their chip. It's going to be patched up with it, letting the people have authorization. We have now the governments stealing monetizing your interaction as a trade, a barter of your information, your valuable information, as a monetary trade that they can tax on the other side. And then you have the cops going to take your data, which is your property at some level, underneath the cover of that they had to speak with you, totally violating your right to be free from the interaction, given there was no actual need. And the disregard of all that, and then despite even indefinite detention, and despite even that you can be considered, as I've been telling you, they don't have the right to defame you and call you an enemy combatant, but they have. Comes this case. It's really kind of astonishing that it takes so long for it to come out, but it confirms that something's still working in this thing called the Constitution. And where this goes, I don't know, but it's really captured my view on what's now available, not because I didn't think it was there, but because nobody was recognizing it, that this case gives us now the current view by the Supreme Court that the government officials are subject to, not you. The government officials are subject to, that you can say, look, this is what the Supreme Court just said about this thing. Victory. Supreme Court rules states cannot steal money from the innocent. You hear that? Supreme Court rules states cannot steal money from the innocent. Colorado, like most states, forces convicted criminals to pay court costs, fees, restitution after they have been found guilty. But the question arises, what happens when someone who's been found guilty has paid their dues and then has their convictions overturned on appeal? Do they get their money back? Not in many states like Colorado. But all that has changed after a landmark ruling from the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I've told you, look at landmark things, look very carefully at them. Why this is landmark is beyond me to understand. This should not be a question. This same question is the problem with the producer and land grantees. We should not be having to defend ourselves at all against any encroachment until there can be found a crime happening with what we do, is really sitting here really loudly in a silent way. This little case is very, very interesting. And I think you need to look at it and parse it out. I think it's expandable by its principles being applied. The state not stealing money from innocent people sounds like a common sense right? Well, unfortunately, in the land of the free, remember I said it's the land of the fee, it was necessary for SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, to step in and tell the greedy state that they do not have the right to steal people's money. Now, you just heard what happened. The people were convicted. They put all their money, almost a couple $1,000, and then their appeal went through, and they were found to be not guilty. The lower court was wrong. The court refused. The county refused to even after the plaintiffs won at the state level appellate court. The state instead insisted that if they wanted their money back, they'd have to file a claim under the Exoneration Act, forcing the defendants to once again prove their innocence to retrieve their funds. And this is where it gets really interesting as well. They're putting a hoop in the retention of your property. The plaintiffs appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, who sided with the citizens in a 7-1 ruling declaring Colorado's law unconstitutional. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of all people, it seemed to me, but nonetheless, wrote the majority opinion for the court declaring the Exoneration Act scheme does not comport with 14th Amendment guarantees of due process. Ginsburg wrote, why'd they have to go through the 14th? Because that's how the state's liable through the federal. So let's just get that little detail. Always, you got to understand how that works. So we're throwing through the 14th Amendment. That makes the rest of the Constitution applicable to the states. And Ginsburg wrote, and other federal things. And Ginsburg wrote that Nelson and Madden are entitled to be presumed innocent. And, quote, should not be saddled with any burden, or any proof burden, to reclaim what is already theirs. In other words, they shouldn't have to demonstrate they're not criminals after the court has already made such a determination. Ginsburg forcefully rejected Colorado's argument that, quote, the presumption of innocence applies only at criminal trials and not to civil claims as under the Exoneration Act. Quote, Colorado may not presume a person adjudged guilty of no crime, nonetheless guilty enough for monetary exactions. So apparently that's not those exactions aren't every kind they're talking about, but they cannot be guilty enough for monetary exactions was a limitation here that I'm not so sure will hold up in where your property has also been taken. Here's the point. Presumption of innocence is real. It's absolute. And you're not supposed to be gone through a second trial or even questioned as to your right to a property that you lawfully already own. To me, this is a very, very large case, big case. And now I'm really, my mind's been working because of what I do and what people I'm working with and helping. If presumption of innocence is absolute here, then it can't be tested by subsequent procedural requirements. When you are arrested and they steal things from you, do they actually have the right to hold that? And in particular, where they don't have the right, where they were found in the beginning to not have the right, or in the cases the way I work, the cases with people I work with, we get the government to prove they had no right by the confessions, admissions, and rejections of the due process that we provide to them. If the presumption, given the presumption of innocence is standard, those things that are not purported to be the fruit of the crime or cannot be stolen, cannot be taken before the conviction. This case was after. And where someone paid in, which they would have required under the, it's been imposed about paying into, even have to be able to make the appeal, they had to pay in as their good faith. Because your original court is really the court of original judgment, and that's the one that stands until overthrown. And so you're arguing against that judgment. And they make you pay up supersedis bonds or whatever, money that you need to do to pay off everything to get your appeal to go. So this case is after the fact, and it was said government could not put another act on you to jump through hoops to get your property. To me, is very big. I'm advancing that I think it can be done ahead of time. In particular, for things that are not the fruits, not a part of whatever the crime might be that you're being charged with. And when we get into certain administrative things, that is not going to be very much. Let me make it less esoteric. Traffic code is administration. Now, it used to be no question that you'd get your stuff returned. But lately, with this bonanza of plunder over government confiscation and forfeiture ahead of the fact, they don't really return much of anything. This case says that's been completely wrong. Now, any reasonable, principled people would say so as well. But because the government has been usurped and overthrown, your government, and overthrown by a bunch of plunderers, thieves, occupiers, this is where it starts to go, and it takes a while before the law catches up. Is why I keep telling you to start understanding what we're up against so you can place these discussions up front. And the more of us doing that, the faster that they can't get this through, the more of us are going up through the ranks in order to shut it all down and giving notices to other people. See, a lot of people don't appreciate this problem of ignorance. This is not a game to be played. This is an action that has to be taken in defense of oneself and others. Because we are in an occupied territory, wherever that is around us. And people don't want to admit to that, and they want to make lots of excuses that it isn't. Boy, people go far and wide to make excuses as well. I'm really astonished at some level. But there was to be law that ruled, not men. And what's happened is we have corporations and their employees running roughshod over both. But this case is pretty huge. And what it can say to us if we start applying in absolute what it just said, what Ginsburg just said. The presumption of innocence stands. Your ownership of property is antecedent to government taking. You can't make people jump through hoops. That's the felony I keep telling you about under the color of authority to maintain those hoops is the felony I tell you is happening under state law that rises to the level of unconstitutionality. How bad it is, the government you call the government. These are just a bunch of plunderers, not in government. Because if this was government, they wouldn't be doing that. They'd be listening to the fact that you're presumed innocent and not stealing this stuff from you because they wouldn't be a bunch of thieves and highwaymen. This is where the idea of taxes, theft, has been coming from, and it's improperly placed. And this is my problem with that, is just it gets wrong ideas. You start put your energy into things that really aren't going to get anybody anywhere. And then they get the wrong idea. Because they start looking at the idea instead of fighting what caused the idea, which if they did, they'd then focus on the purpose, and they would refocus everything where it was supposed to be, and the problem would go away. Such as people and shiny things. As I tell you, the groupers in the schools that we send a flock in. The herd is a school of fish. And the hook. Remember the hook that they said in the DNA? They throw a hook out there. You can bite at that hook if you want. Supreme Court rules states cannot steal money from the innocent. If I'm presumed innocent before the fact of a conviction, and I interact with the government, I'm going to add you one more thing. And even admit any code in for anything, I'm presumed innocent, even in civil matters now. Can they be putting taxation on my property? Can they be putting penalties on my property? Can they be doing anything up until the time of conviction? This case says no. So everything that's been going on against people before that fact has been a unconstitutional theft across the country. And I'm getting something here that I don't talk much at all. It's in the code for the traffic code, that motor vehicle code they call it. It's traffic. It's commerce. If you go look very carefully at your insurance liabilities, you will find how it's supposed to work. And your liability on how it's supposed to work, not how they do it to you and how you accept it and no one argues, but how they're supposed to do it, is that they can't put anything on you until after a court has adjudged you doing wrong in the accident that you caused damage in. And it might blow a lot of people away to hear this one, when you read very carefully on how it's supposed to work, that's when you go down and get your insurance. And the underwriter is supposed to give you a policy you can pay for and spread the harm of the damage you caused over time. And this is all supposed to be, again, for businesses. They all presume you to be a business, a corporate entity in the state doing business in the state. You're supposed to have a judgment against you before the state can do anything as an imposition. What's interesting about the way they have worked this is when you go back to the bankruptcy of the 1930s, this little imposition ends up helping to help businesses to not destroy them because they might have an accident that causes the damage they cause could bankrupt them as a business. And that's not good for business generally. That's what insurance was made for, to ameliorate the damages over time that are judged against someone for doing it, conducting their activities in such a way that caused the harm. Not like they have now before the fact. But that takes someone to go and read the statutes and understand that. It takes someone to do more than just say, oh, well, I can't get understanding what the government's doing, and understanding what they're doing means I'm participating with them. No, that's the rules that the people that are coming against you are supposed to honor. And when they don't, you have the means by which you explain the how of how they caused your harm. And until you're willing to do that, then you're walking as an accessory to a crime against you, and you have volunteered your view that it was okay for them to do that to the harm they cause if you don't do it correctly. That's not my rule. I'm not making this up for my sake. I'm telling you there's a reality about how easy it is to forego what our rights are. For everybody that wants to talk about all their rights, I'm not so sure that many of you actually know how they work and what they are and how to, again, get that remedy for it and what it takes. What, as a society, what we've done to allow that, notwithstanding the occupier. Remember that I'm talking to you about how you read the code and you see how it really works versus the way it's going. Should have been a problem for everybody a long time ago. That it hasn't is our problem. We now then fabricate all kinds of ideas around that, misinterpretation, misaction on our part as the thing we need to do. And that's, again, where we fall short. So, for as battered and tattered as it seems, there's a constitution, there's a presumption of innocence. I'm adding into this a little bit more for the way I work with it. I'm definitely going to be using this, no doubt. If people that are lawfully holding their property you have to prove that you have that property first of all, and there's ways to do that, whatever that way is. And you have no charge of crime or claim against you by conviction, there is nothing that they should be able to keep from you that's other than maybe the evidence that may show that you were in the criminal conduct. Everything else is off limits. It's not supposed to be tested. The government has no power to test it. It's a big principle to remember that the court just supported. I'm pausing here because I just looked at my next tab, and I had a neat way to jump across to this, but it escapes me, so I'm going to have to do it cold. We're going to jump from that big deal right there and change gears just a little bit. Not too much off the DNA modifications and the things that they create, and how willing agency is willing to throw things in, how little y'all are willing to write letters to stop it and make comments. In fact, there's two big ones that Trump made some executive orders now that forcing the government agencies to go relook at some actions that are huge. And so we're all of a sudden have a whole lot more work to try and do in very, very short time, which throws off again the wrong that has been done, or at least gives us an opportunity. As I told you, we're looking at a very narrow window with this guy on how to get back some of this stuff and be ready to take advantage of anything that falls our way, and it's doing that we're attempting to bring back those lands and those things that the agencies have stolen because they listened not to reason, they listened not to law or potential harm or impact. They call it impacts. But they were kind of having the revolving door of industry. Stealing here, you're not innocent here. They have the presumption of innocence at what they do, but you are deemed to not have an innocent protection device. A rough way to get to this story. Field tests of GMO algae spark outrage. That they're going to pollute your world with GMO-modified algae, of all things, another base life form that has the ability to change its DNA almost at will, whatever it wants to adjust really quickly. The study was just done that, in fact, this algae can't be trapped, so that it won't interact with the world and won't start to potentially modify other algae. Now, this algae has a good start. The best intentions are the best. What's the end of that phrase about the intentions, or the path to hell is paved by good intentions? Scientists from the University of California, San Diego, and Sapphire Energy released results Thursday from the first open pond trials of genetically engineered microalgae. The study, along with research and development of genetically modified algae for biofuels. I'm going to interject. Remember, this is all part of the carbon problem. This is all the fiasco that Al Gore apocryphal has started in climate change and all this nonsense that's been going on. This is what they're doing this for. And again, they're all public-private partnerships in all this. Remember, these universities are agencies of the government. They're government. You got to you really got to keep plugging in these points, because this is very serious connections to harm that they're not supposed to be doing that they do because everyone's crickets. That the least of us working is not quite enough, but to call attention to it and to cause them some trouble, but not necessarily to stop them. Because here we have the environmentalists, Friends of the Earth, which are probably not friends at all. They're a conservation group, and I would put them as an enemy. They also see the danger in this. And so I'm not going to defeat and come contrary to that inquiry, at least, that wasn't done. The study, along with the research and development of genetically modified algae, you want to go that way? Algae, for biofuels is occurring ahead of adequate regulatory oversight, including the United States Environmental Protection Agency's process to establish and update regulations for genetically engineered algae to protect human health and the environment. Well, folks, those policies right now by executive order of Trump are under question. You have you only got like a week and a half left to drop in a comment to open it up, and I'd say, tell them you didn't get enough time. We just found out about it. It's almost done. That you get to jump in and tell them to process their regulatory agendas are not actually sufficient. But anyway, this study confirmed that genetic engineered algae grown in open ponds will escape and spread into the environment. Once this genie is out of the bottle, there's no way to put it back, said Dana Pearls, senior campaigner with the Friends of the Earth. As a campaigner, I don't know about all that. I don't know about the Friends of Earth. They would be an enemy anywhere else to us. The point is that these genetically modified life forms aren't supposed to get out in the wild. There's apparently no proper functioning of the agencies to keep that in check, and I think a lot of this is no different than the problem that I was trying to help the Indians with up there in North Dakota. You don't want to listen to the requirements, and you don't want to do it right, correctly, set your records the way they need to, put the challenges where they need to be, and this stuff gets going through. And this is going to be a particularly pernicious one, where it's the Friends of the Earth, the environmental terrorists, who can't even stop this. And so I'm finding an interesting alliance that may be being built, no different than this year now. You hear for all the so-called leftists, the Antifada that would have been last year counter to the Second Amendment, they're all picking up their guns now, and they're seeing the value. They're seeing the value in the Second Amendment to go shoot other people that are against to shoot other people that are not in their opinion set. Completely a contorted view of the world, but there it was. Now they agree. Now the people that were anti-gun are now picking up guns. That's how stupid we are. That together here we have a common problem in the people seeing that these GMOs can't get out in the wild. They're just not able to do that, and we feel that we're going to be safe in any regard. Remember, the algae are what most likely create the bulk of the oxygen created in the environment. You start messing them around and what they're going to be doing for biofuel, it's not about the biofuel, it's now what are they doing in the biosphere and altering their contribution to an atmosphere that the nature got us here, that we live by. The thing, who thinks of algae and air? I don't. I take breathing for granted at some point. I learned not to, but my point is that you take a lot for granted. This is one of them. This is a serious, serious threat, and it's going by the wayside. And I'm suggesting to you here, no different than we have the right of innocence. I'm thinking we need to, I've told you before, challenge the right of innocence on a corporation to do something, because we have the right to not associate. That's in the First Amendment as well, the freedom from an association that you can show could do harm. They call it impact, so you got to use those terms. It's not I didn't make it up. That's what you have to do. They also have a problem when they do these things to comport with NEPA, and that requires coordination. So now you get your county involved. Every county, everywhere. How do you know this algae is going to be contained? All of a sudden you get some nice big storm, a low pressure system winds up, turns into a dust devil even, and lifts this stuff out and moves it down and into the atmosphere. And now it's sitting in your ponds, building and killing off the algae, changing the algae there to do something, and all of a sudden now it's altering itself to the environment it finds, and it's going to survive, and it doesn't care. It doesn't care what it's planned, what was the chimera that it was planned to be. It starts affecting your health. It starts affecting your environment. And this starts getting us back into, we better take control of this or someone else is. Now, moving into another important thing that happened, I'm a little bit confused, but I am a little bit confused on really what's happening. These things that are going on within the government, really, I told you, is about the bottom line. And something went underneath the radar, I think. It may not mean much to people, but to me it was important. Again, you see the elements of a constitution working, despite it doesn't look like it's happening. Killing people, the government's killing people left and right. The governments go to war without really paying attention. They cause harm on other people underneath the pretext and pretense of false and deceptive issues. But along with all of these things is there these legislations that seem to be running on a train to really nowhere, but helps the bottom line. The House Republicans to vote on health care on Thursday. What this was a repeal of Obamacare. And what they then said, it was a repeal replace, and this is where my little bit of my confusion is. Is it just a repeal of Obamacare and a replace with Trump's scare? Or was it this is the repeal, and then they're going to have another act to bring in Trump's scare? Remember, it's all universal care. It's all under the UN and the mental health conditioning as well. It's all there, no matter what you call it. What I found interesting in this report was how they were treating the states and getting us into this legal entity construction. I've told you, 26 or so states adopted the Model Business Corporation Act. People may or may not have studied that. People may not know where to go read and what to do. It's all part of this underlying this foundation of this usurpation. And you want to think that your states are sovereign, and they're not. It's certainly not where it takes money for doing things. And then there's this imposition that happened through this repeal and then maybe a new imposition. But let me remind you, look very carefully at what they just did there. Justice Roberts said that the Obamacare was a tax, remember? And I told you, and anybody who was looking could see, that that so-called tax originated in the Senate. The Constitution requires that it originates in the House. Guess what they did? I think this is a big faux pas fix more than anything else. Why it's going to be Trump's scare and now the Republicans get to do it their way is nearly not the point. It's still universal care. And the states now are given so-called certain things which kind of indicate what their status is relative to this. that they started this bill in the House. They fixed the tax problem here, is what I think is going on. No difference. I mean, neither here nor there, but if you kind of miss the details, you miss the subtle consistency with constitutional matters. And I'm suggesting to you, when you see the consistency with the constitutional matters, that they appear to be getting away with stuff in other ways, only tells me that maybe me, don't understand how it is constitutional what they did. In other words, there's an underlying frame that is being followed, notwithstanding our misunderstanding and misapprehension of it. And so that's what I'm trying to, this is in a way a secret to you that I use when I start looking things that all of a sudden aren't going right, but they continue going. And they're not overturned. Maybe our perception is messed up. And that's where I told you start getting into not absolutes, but columns of potentials and possibilities. But this is okay. So now they've fixed their tax problem. This is a tax. I'm not going to get into all the nuances about it all and all the imposition. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying this is what they've done. They're fixing this problem they had. And then they made it Trump scare. And this is what happens with the states as they say a benefit. And states that obtain waivers could charge those with pre-existing conditions much more. States would be able to show a mechanism for people to get coverage, such as high-risk pools. The Republican bill would provide $125 billion to help pay for the pool's high costs. Now, there's a whole lot to analyze here. I'm not going to do that. Let's go to the point of what triggered me to even comment on this. And states that obtain waivers. Remember, I've told you to go to your Administrative Procedures Act and look very carefully for all these regulatory impositions. They presume you to be in commerce anyway. They presume you to be a business by that same straw man's deceit that they put on everybody, that you're just presumed that status. And where do we find the provision for waiver but in the Administrative Procedures Act for a business that's being harmed by an imposition, the provision of which is either waived or the government pays you to implement it? We see both provided for here. Let's go to the bottom first, and I'll go backwards, because this is probably how this will apply. The Republican bill would provide $125 billion to help pay for pools' high cost. I will suggest to you that money will be dispersed to the states upon their request of the cost in excess of what they can handle, as the Administrative Procedures provides for waiver for any business or corporation. And when that money's not enough, the states will seek a waiver of the extra that they need to continue to do their thing. Is telling you that the states are conceived as nothing more than businesses. I'm pausing. I want you to get this. These are how you pick the elements out to see what they're actually working with when no one's telling you. Did you know? Has anybody read the APA to find that provision when I told you? If you haven't, you don't even know what I'm talking about. Now you might take my word for it, because I'm thinking I'm pretty accurate here, aren't I? If not, we fix it really quick. We go to the black and white, we fix it. Why was I able to read that paragraph and come up with that? It's because I read the APA. As boring and as soul-crushing as it is, you read it, and you see what the game plan is. And you see the elements that are built in that comport with due process, the silent constitution running. This is the Administrative Procedures provision for waiver is a takings principle. It avoids takings, the waivers and the costs being paid by the government or written off. I tell the miners to do this all the time when they call me names and poo-poo me and say I can't do much. Nobody, and this is the same thing, the 3 attorneys and EPA, the regional director, Region 10 director, had no answer for when I asked them in 2005. Not because I was asking a question, because I was wanting the form that gave me the waiver or the request of the money grant to pay me to take my time to impose their regulations so the state I wasn't the only one having to come up with the expense of what the state and the people had determined to be healthy for them. That's a taking principle. The Constitution is working silently here. When I read that, did you pick up on that? I hope some of you did. Waivers and payment by government is the provision of a business being paid for the imposition of a regulation that helps to destroy their bottom line. Your Constitution's working right here in your face. You have tools that you could be picking up, and nobody seems to want to do that. Nobody seems to care. George Carlin comes in mind. He said that pretty melodically, I think, as well. Nobody seems to care. And nobody seems to step up for themselves. And I'm here weekly to try and tell you, here's another one. Here's another one. Try this. Go here. Stop these people here. Shut them down. Make a speed bump out of yourself for a few more to throw in front of them and make a speed bump. It's not going to kill you if you do it this way either. You're not in jeopardy. And it could provide a whole lot more protection while you're actually working the law that underlies this, which is that constitutional limitation. You learn the terrain in order to do this. You learn the terminology in order to do this. If you don't do this, what they plan for you comes on you. What you accept, what you buy in, is an acceptance of the outcome they planned for you. What you plug into without your due diligence is probably not something you've made yourself. What you accept is really maybe even a measure of your moral integrity, if I'll be so bold to sound so judgmental on that, which I'm not. This is really a down deep heart check about what do we really believe in the world. What is really a principle that we really need to hold to without excuse? What will we do about it? Once we hear this next story, do we continue? Do we continue to move along, or do we start to make decisions that are better for us in this health? This is what I was getting on the health side. I didn't do the jump very well, but the algae, whatever you want to pronounce it, the detriment to our environment, the allowance for it, those that want to care for you universally, globalistically, bringing this stuff on, making it their way, fixing problems that were right in front of you that no one said anything about, that they fix. It's going to continue to go through without an obstruction. That we then hear these things, the phones being tapped and all that, is not the limit of it, folks. This encryption that doesn't work is not the limit. We have physiological problems. The environment and this algae that makes whatever byproducts it does can be contaminated. Do I think it actually will? Not really, but it contaminates a nature that has adapted to here. And it does it by an abrupt determination by man's interference. Is, I don't think, a good thing. But here's the story again about your phones. Concentrated evil. Children whose mothers used their mobile phones more than 4 times a day during pregnancy are more likely to be hyperactive, study says. Now, a lot of us might want to have a little bit more energy in our life, but I'm telling you not this way. Children whose mothers frequently spoke on the mobile phones while pregnant are more than likely to be hyperactive. Youngsters aged 5 to 7 are 28% more likely to suffer if their mothers spoke on the mobile 4 times or for over an hour a day while expecting. Children whose mothers never used a mobile phone while pregnant have the lowest risk of behavioral and emotional problems. This may be due to radio waves known as electromagnetic radiation given off by mobile phones, which has uncertain health implications. I'll stop there. You make the determination. Remember, binary weapons and such, they want people to be dysfunctional. You see the emotional problems in the world developed also since phones. Is this a causative statement? How about I don't know? How about if we use this study to lead us into, go ahead and continue using those phones or shut them off? Understand the dangers that the governments legally put you into. They let you buy in and plug in to your harm. Along the lines I consider of health, and I told you this a while back, focus, if those of you in the 420 crowd, be really cautious of the recreational side. That needs a whole lot more work. Be careful when you settle yourself, and do settle yourself if you must, in the medical marijuana side. But be careful that now you can also be deemed to be construed to have a mental health disorder to do so. However, this is another way the government can check these things. In the war on drugs, so-called, Congress agrees to give Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, $0 to wage war on medical marijuana. I wanted to speak to this to confirm to you. I told you they're going to probably back off on the medical side because the court cases are coming to protect that. Watch this. Doesn't make it illegal. It just shows you that appropriations of money are all important to the action and funding of the government. The Constitution is in work as silently as it appears and as abysmally as it seems to be working in this area, as I look down and see the word abysmal and parrot that word as the proper word in this whole entire problem. The war on drugs is such an abysmal failure. The government has become an abysmal failure, but we were duty bound to keep the republic the way it was supposed to be. So I'm not going to point my finger out too fast. What I'm going to say is that there's people out there that are working against their interests on a plan to do so. Those are committing treason. Those are criminals. Those are war criminals. But here's another control to your health. Again, marijuana to me is kind of an inert thing until I realized it was a plant, and that was where I was kind of interested. But now to find out that people actually get medical use out of it, despite the DEA's and the government's scheduling, is an important factor for you to see. If there's zero money given to wage war on anything, they cannot act in that part. And this I'm talking also to the miners, if you will, when the government said simply that Congress, in violation of its fiduciary, in 1993 says that the BLM will not take money, we will not give any money for them to take the money for your patent applications. And so as soon as the Congress made that stipulation about the appropriation of what the money has to go to, and the agencies have to follow that guidance, they stopped taking our patent applications, which is a fiduciary breach on many levels. The point is that the government can be constrained by where the money gets appropriated. And so this is another point of departure for you to start exposing that you can work through one of the many dimensional avenues to advocate for money not being spent somewhere to control it. Do I like having to do that? No, but I don't know what else to do in this world. I don't have anybody talking to me with a better idea, I guess is the point. It was ours to keep, and we've let it slip through. And now they're working on our memory, and they're working against our own being. They're working against our health. They're working on the environment to beat you down. And yet there sits silent this Constitution that works right in front of us, and we all complain about it. None of us use it. And I'll just put that in a general, none as a general conversation. None of us use it. So we can have all our arguments, and we can sit there and argue amongst ourselves and do nothing, or we can turn all our knowledge into the proper place and start to become a force to be reckoned with. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I've said something that gives you an insight, empowers that, puts that power to you to makes you move a little bit better in the direction you need to. Thank you, Grimner, for reallibertymedia.com and the Blogcaster and the archive and all you do there, in freedomsnetwork.com. A social network, and Jules, podcast, pastcast, and recast on ucy.tv, and all you did to develop that, and on YouTube as well. Thank you very much there, and your terrestrial broadcasters. I appreciate what all you're doing. One quick note, quickly, if you're finding, I just wanted to know, check, is the quality of the broadcast okay on the RLM site? And if not, go over to the Spreaker site to get a higher feed rate for the FM, if that's it. I'll be with you next week. Tech Diffs, nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
That's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.